Okay, here is the definite proof that the aliens exist. So there is no any more mystery about this. That's 100% that they exist until they release the final images or footage on, I guess, on the commercial media, so for everyone to see. But this person, it's is the most reliable source so far with Bob Lazar, and he even confirms his story with ZETA Reticuli. And here it is. Here we go.
Through a new organisation called the New Paradigm Institute. Welcome, Daniel Sheehan. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Ross. Busy and excited.
Look, welcome to this inaugural episode of Reality Check. It's a pleasure to have you on board our first episode. I want to get straight away, Danny, to a story you've told before, but which I think most Americans are completely unaware of. It's a story I love. I wrote about it in my book. And it's the story of how you were retained by Marcia Smith from the Congressional Research Service to do some work for President Jimmy Carter into the UAP issue. And before we get to the issue of what you were asked to do, just explain to me what you were told by Marcia Smith had happened when President Jimmy Carter asked to be briefed on the UAP mystery.
Right. What happened, Ross, is that President Carter was elected like on November 4th of 1976. And right by the 19th of November, even before he'd been sworn in, one of the first things he did is he sent word to have the CIA director come down to Plains, Georgia, to his home and brief him personally at his home about the UFO issue and his potential relationship to any extraterrestrial civilization. It turns out that the CIA director at that time was George H.W. Bush, who was later to become president. But at that time, he had been appointed by the new president, Gerald Ford, who had just taken over from Nixon, having resigned due to the Watergate burglary scandal. And George H.W. Bush refused to give him the information. George Bush told him that as elected president, he had no reason to know this information. He said that if, in fact, Carter was willing to keep him on as his CIA director, so that he could become permanently the CIA director, that he might be willing to tell him about this. But President Carter did not. And so what President Carter did is instead he contacted the Congress and said, look, the Congress needs to be involved in this. And he asked the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives to contact the Congressional Research Service and to have them produce two major reports for the president. One on the probabilities and likelihood of there being an extraterrestrial civilization, and secondly, whether it might be responsible for at least some of these sightings of the UFOs. And I was contacted by Marcia Smith, who was the director of the Congressional Research Service Science and Technology Division, and asked to become special counsel to that investigation because I was at the Jesuit National Headquarters. I was their general counsel in their social ministry office, which was their public policy office.
So can I just take you then very quickly to what happened? I'm going to tell this in a rough, quick form. As I understood it, you insisted on being given access to the hitherto unreleased, secret, unreleased Project Blue Book files. And incredibly, they agreed to do that. You were given access because this was a presidential fiat. And as a result of that, and I took great pleasure the other day, I was walking back from a bar near Congress, and I stood at the Madison building, the very same building where you were given entry before it was even officially opened. Tell me what happened that day when you went to the Madison building in the National Archives. What happened?
Well, what happened is Marcia Smith had told me that I had to bring two forms of official photo ID. So I brought my Washington, D.C. driver's license, and I brought my passport. And I came to the building. I was surprised that nobody had even occupied the building yet. It was brand new. It had just gotten built. And there were these two suits standing outside of the door waiting for me. They demanded to see both forms of my identification, and I showed them both, and then they showed me in. So I went into the hallway, and they said, go down the hallway to the right, and you'll see an elevator there on the left. And you go down into the basement, and you'll see the place to go. So I went in, I got in the elevator, and I went down. As I was going down the elevator, on instinct, I just opened up my briefcase and took out a yellow pad and slipped it under my arm, and then closed my briefcase. The elevator arrived in the basement. I got out, and it was dark down there. There weren't lights on, but I could see down the hall. I could see a light coming out of the room, and there were these two other suits, these guys, big kind of husky-looking guys that were there. So I go down the hallway. They both of them demanded to see my two forms of identification. It was sort of like they resented my even being there. And so but I showed them, and they said, look, leave that briefcase here. You can't take any notes. You can't record anything. But here the stuff is. They brought the stuff for you. And so I put the briefcase down. Yes.
So I just want to set the scene for this. This is you, Daniel Sheehan, being given access to the darkest, deepest secrets in the American military-industrial complex. You've asked for and been given access to the UFO files, the secret files of Project Blue Book, the files the government denies exists. What did you find?
Well, what I did is I walked in, and I was in this comparatively small room. It was about maybe 20 feet wide and about 12 feet or so deep. And there were these three big cardboard fold-out tables. And they had like shoeboxes, these little light green, kind of government green shoeboxes with the little ties on them. And there was a microfiche machine that was there. And so I sat down. And I took the yellow pad out, and I slid it over behind one of the boxes, so that if they looked in, they wouldn't see it. And I opened up the first box, and they had these little film canisters of microfiche film. So I took the first one out, and I put it into this old-timey microfiche machine, and started cranking it and looking at it. It was all these documents, and I said, I don't know how long they're going to allow me to stay in here. And so I said, if I start reading each one of these documents as a lawyer, it's going to take forever. So I sort of cranked through them to see if there were any photographs anywhere. And nothing was there in the first canister. So I folded it out and put it back in. I opened up a second canister, went through it, and had a lot of documents again. I could see all the official stamps on them and top secret designations, etc. And then I got to the third canister, I think it was, and partway in, there it was. Here was this series of photographs, black and white photographs of a crashed flying saucer. Wasn't any doubt about what it was. It was a winter scene. There was snow on the ground, and the saucer was a classic large disc saucer, about 40, 50 feet across, with a big dome on the top of it. It had hit into this snow-covered field, and it plowed this big ditch all the way across the field, like the earth was all turned up, and it was stuck into the side of this big snow-covered embankment, stuck in there like in a 45-degree angle. It was stuck in the side of the hill. And I could see all around it, there were these Air Force personnel. They were in winter jackets, with the big fur around the hood, and they were taking photographs of it. And I actually saw one of the guys in one of the photos. There were like three of them that I saw the photos. And they had one of these old-timey cameras, a movie camera, like with the two big round canisters on the top of them. So it must have been like in the late 40s or early 50s or something, I figured. And so and then all of a sudden I realized that in one of the photos I could see around the bottom of the dome of the crashed saucer that was stuck in the embankment, these symbols. And I looked at them and I said, wow, look at them. There's nothing like anything I've ever seen. They're not Russian, they're not Chinese, they're not, hieroglyphics. They're totally unique. So I said, okay, I'm going to trace these because I want to make sure they're absolutely identical to what is there and that they're in the exact sequence that they're in. And so I did is I took out the
These are top secret files, Danny. Isn't that an act of espionage?
No, I didn't clear to see them. And so what I did, I took out the yellow pad, and interestingly enough, it's just one of those instinctive things. I opened up the yellow pad to the inside cardboard backing. And what I did is I pushed the backing underneath the microfiche machine, and then focused the microfiche right onto the inside cover of the yellow pad, so that I traced them identically, absolutely, totally accurately, every single one of them. And there must have been about 8 or 10 of them that were all obvious. And so I traced them in detail. And I got them all done. I kept looking up to see if anybody was watching. And so I got it all done. And I closed the yellow pad. And I said, "That's it. I got it. That's a UFO, man. And look, it's got all these unique symbols on it." And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the stuff away. I put the little microfiche away, put it back in the box, took the yellow pad, stood up, and put it under my arm. I had my suit on, and I didn't put it inside my suit to try to hide it. I just stuck it under my arm, and I turned around and got up and walked out. I walked right straight out the door, and the two guys were kind of surprised. And I'm surprised, and I think about it, that I left as soon as I did, but I had the information, and I said, I don't want to take any chances at all. So I left. I went out the door, and I reached down and picked up my briefcase that was sitting there by the side, and I started walking down the hall. And all of a sudden, one of the guys said, "Hold it. Hey, hold it." And I stopped, and he said, "What is that you got there?" And I said, "Oh, that's my briefcase. I just picked my briefcase up," which was there. He said, No, under your arm. What's under your arm there?" They both of them came over to me and kind of loomed over me. And one of them reached over and yanked the yellow pad away from me, and then ruffled through all the yellow pages. And there was nothing on them, of course. And then he kind of grumpily handed it back to me. And so I put it back under my arm, and he just turned around, picked up my briefcase, and started walking down the hall. I hope I wasn't whistling. I didn't try to get up, but I went down the hallway and got into the elevator. When I got in the elevator, I opened my briefcase and put the yellow pad in, got up, and went up the stairs, drew out, and walked right straight out the door, and went back to Jesuit headquarters.
So that is 1976 when that happened?
77. That was the spring of 77. This all happened. He got elected in November 76. On November 19th is when he confronted Bush and was refused the information. This was like early spring of 1977.
So 44 years ago, you got to see what you believe is categorical evidence of a crash retrieval of a non-human craft.
Well, I knew that these symbols were not from anything I'd ever seen on the planet. And I had a fairly extensive history. But as I say, I knew they weren't Chinese, they weren't Russian, they weren't Hindu, they weren't anything that I'd ever seen. I've seen a significant amount of things. I studied foreign policy at Harvard College under Henry Kissinger. I studied theology and stuff at the Harvard Divinity School. I studied different legal texts. I was, in fact, the legal research assistant for Professor Jerome Cohen, who was the head of the International Law Department at Harvard. So I did lots of investigation about Chinese history and Chinese law. Nothing. These symbols were like nothing that I've ever seen anywhere on Earth.
Now, you're very sure.
So there you have it. This is the final confirmation that aliens exist and that we were in contact with them for a long time. And they were probably here for thousands of years and who knows how long. And then from the other interview with him, he even confirms the Bob Lazar story with ZETA Reticuli. And then for the end, there's going to be something else. But here we go.
Her confirmation, because there wasn't any way she could have drawn something like that. She didn't know anything about stuff like that, right? And so John said, okay, now there's some solid evidence that at least some of this is coming from an extraterrestrial civilization somewhere. But he thought that there was other stuff going on as well. That it wasn't that this was a delusion on their part, but that in fact there was something going on that had to do with what is normally considered to be religion, and apparitions of the saints see, and the apparitions of Mary, that these kind of things that are happening. And so he started exploring it and going to interview indigenous people around the world who who believe that they have direct encounters with star people. In the Lakota tribe, for example, the Lakota people believe that they come from the Pleiades originally, and that they came down from the Pleiades in this light chamber, came down into the Black Hills, into the wind caves, and came up through the wind caves. It's a very specific tradition that they believe. And there are other indigenous tribes. So John started interviewing people and put together this thing called the Project on Extraordinary Experience Research. Just one of the extraordinary experiences was these encounters with what they experienced as being an extraterrestrial being, in a spacecraft. But there were other experiences that people had that made it appear that it was like interdimensional, that they thought that these beings were coming from some other dimension. In fact, John got called by Bob Bigelow out from the Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
This is back in 1995 or so, right? And he got a call from Bigelow, and Bigelow asked John to come fly out and see him right away and bring your lawyer who helped you there at Harvard. So we flew out to see Bigelow, and when we arrived, like a day later, after this event had taken place, we arrived and met with him, and he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He decided, I don't want to talk about it. Colin Kelleher was there. And Colin took me aside and stepped into the room next door and told me all about what had happened there at the ranch. It had to do with this kind of portal that it was like at the ranch. And this portal had opened, and one of their people had seen this person, a big, tall, 7-foot tall being, that had big kind of shaggy hair, looked almost like a Yeti kind of character. And Colin told me all about it. And so I went back out and was talking to Bigelow to see whether he wanted to do it, because what happened is Bigelow.
No, this is not what I wanted to show you, but let's see. Let's go back here. 42. No. 42. 40. Okay, this is ZETA.
From an extraterrestrial civilization somewhere. But he thought that there was other stuff going on as well. That it wasn't that this was a delusion on their part.
That's not it. Oh, I'm not finding it. Let's see.
Completely impossible to believe that any spacecraft could actually come from a distant star system and come to our planet. Just couldn't be true. Because, they can't go faster than the speed of light, and therefore they can't get there.
What did John think about all this? Did he really think that this was like spacecraft coming from another star system, or did he think this was something like inside the human mind?
No, it wasn't.
No, let me find it and I'll look up.
Thinking about was that he thought it was quite clear that there was evidence that some of these events involved a spacecraft from some other planetary system. For example, the Betty Barney Hill case. Betty Hill actually got one of the people on the craft that she believed that they'd been abducted and brought onto to show her a map. You probably have heard about that. Showed her the star map, right? And she did get hypnotized by a guy in Boston, a professional hypnotist, and she redrew the star map that was shown to him. And nobody could figure out where it was. And it turns out that it wasn't later, until they had the computers that could do it, that they reversed the star chart to figure out the perspective from which the star map was drawn. That came from their planet, which turned out to be ZETA, Reticuli. And when that happened, that was kind of further confirmation, because there wasn't any way she could have drawn something like that. She didn't know it.
So here we go. Bob Lazar story, again, confirmed with ZETA Reticuli. This is the information he got at Area S4 from his co-worker that was explaining him how all about aliens and what he knew, and that they came from ZETA Reticuli, and this confirms again his story. And then for the end, I want to show you at the end of the interview what it says about the current situation and what's going on. 232, 250. Okay.
Corporations and the wealthiest families that own the shares of stock. It's just as bad as you think it is. You know, they view their job as securing their continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials. I've sat and had direct conversations with people that tell you that if there's some third world country that is sitting on some sort of major resource that turns out to be of real value economically or militarily for us, if we don't go get it first, China or Russia will go get it. So we'll go get it first. And that's aggressive war. That is a violation of every single premise of a just war theory. You are the aggressor. You are the bad guy. You know? I had the experience when I got ready to leave to go to college. I grew up with my aunt and uncle. And my uncle was the head of the Republican County Committee up in Warren County, up in northern New York, right?
And I don't know what it would take to make that stuff come to light, and I don't see them letting go of it.
Well, the problem is it's even worse than that. It's one step worse than that. In the 1992 United States Defense Department Policy Planning Guidance document that I told you about, that they drafted up, starting on the Monday morning after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, what they did is they put this document together, and they said the reason that we don't want to step back and reduce our military budget just because the Soviet Union has been disbanded now, and that we've been rationalizing the $700 billion a year on the grounds that we had to protect ourselves against them. The reason that we want to increase the military budget, because now we have the chance to establish full spectrum dominance over the planet. And the purpose of this will be to maintain, quote, to maintain our continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials needed by our major corporations. Okay? Because that's what they do. And they view that as they are Rome. They are the aggressor.
Right.
So there you have it. Now you know the whole truth. And if you want to find out more, you can go on the links that I will post in the comments. And this is the things that I knew from before, and it is just great to know about this person, learn more about him, Daniel Sheehan, and that it confirms the Bob Lazar story. I knew since the first time I saw and heard Bob talk, I knew he was legitimate, and that the story was the truth. So there you go. We have 100% evidence that the aliens exist, and that Bob Lazar story is true. So wishing you a great day. Until next time, you take care.